every single person is deserving of love. Sure, they've made mistakes. I have too, but we're all deserving of love. If we can get to that emotion, life is so joyful.
Hello and welcome to the Stroke It podcast. I'm Alday Townsend, your host. Thank you for joining me. I'm so excited for you to be inspired to live your life fully, to take ownership of your time, your schedule, and your life, but most importantly, learn and grow and develop personally and professionally. Myself and others are going to share life lessons that we've learned through leadership, through heartache, through pain, through struggles, and we'll be sharing some success stories with you as well. Super eager for you to dive in, learn, and grow. And once again, just take ownership of your life today. Hello, rock stars. Jenny Townsend here, your host. I am with an amazing rock star, Matt O'Neill. Him and I have been talking. I was like, I need to hit record. We have so much value. We have so many tools, tips, advice. You are going to be the happiest you've ever been after listening to this podcast. Matt has a wealth of knowledge. He's an expert who has positively impacted the lives of over 100,000 people worldwide. He's the author of Good Mood Revolution, and he is also the host of Good Mood Revolution podcast. The book is amazing. I got a sneak peek of it. He's doing pre-orders right now. You're going to want to get his book. He's going to share with you how to get that. He's all about happiness. Matt, thank you so much for being part of this. I'm already so happy.
Jenny, what's up? I'm so freaking pumped to be on this show with you. Huge fan of yours and a huge fan of the energy that you bring into the world. Like, you're going big, girl.
Thank you. Thank you. You are too. And just so excited to have you here. So before we kick off, tell us a little bit of who you are, where do you live, married, children, and how are you so freaking happy?
Happiness is a skill and it takes work. Just like anything, right? And this is one of the greatest misconceptions about happiness is like, oh, okay, well, I should just be happy. Well, that's like, I should just have the perfect body, right? Without ever working at it, without ever going to the gym, without ever exercising and sweating, I should just be perfectly in shape and look like an Adonis. No, it takes a lot of freaking work. So why would the thing we all want, which is joy, happiness, elation, excitement, why would that not also require work like everything else that's worthwhile? So I work at it, right? But I teach people how to work at it. It's a skill and it can improve with effort, and it's just really understanding. So I got to this place by being unhappy. that was like it's the easiest way to say it. Super unhappy in my teens, super unhappy even as a little kid sometimes. And then like addictions and all that stuff comes in because you're unhappy and you're trying to mask everything. I'm like, oh, I'll just drink all my problems away. And then that doesn't work either. But also I was driven to super high achievement, right? Because I didn't feel like I was super worthwhile. So I would just achieve and achieve and achieve. And that way, then everyone would know that I was lovable. So I achieved a ton, built up businesses that ended up being like some of the fastest growing businesses in the state of South Carolina. I own 3 companies now. They're all really successful. And then I met my wife and she's incredible. We didn't just want to have like a child. We decided we'd have 4 children. So we have 4 children and it's kind of like accumulation. I'm like, oh, if I just do everything bigger, then I'll be happy. And I ended up getting to this point where my life is huge and yet I'm just cracking under the stress and the pressure of like how big everything is, how much energy it takes to keep going. And I feel like everything's just like a grind, right? Like, oh, every day I just get up and I'm like doing this like exercise and doing things like make sure I have enough energy to go crush it all day at work. And I get home and I take care of the kids and I'm doing bath time and bedtime and reading the books. And then I just crash in bed and I do it all over again. I wasn't fulfilled, right? And so I said, there's got to be something else. It wasn't the money. It wasn't the success. It wasn't the businesses. It wasn't even the wife and the children that was bringing me joy. I thought all of these things would be like the answer. And then I'd just be happy. When I was a kid, I didn't have all of that, a broken home and we didn't have money and that kind of thing. So I thought that was like the answer. It wasn't. And then I just shifted my focus. I said, all right, well, if I could study the principles of being successful in business, I'm going to study the principles of being the happiest human being on the planet. And guess what? It worked. It totally worked. And then you don't have to be unsuccessful at the same time. You get to be happy and successful. You get to be happy and a father of four and happy and have a great marriage. And all of that stuff can coexist. Happiness is not an either or equation. And that's how I ended up getting into it. And once I learned it, I'm like, it is my life mission to raise the joy of humanity. And that is truly my mission in life.
I absolutely love that. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that story. And I have just a smile on my face just being here with you. And I can just tell like everything in your world must be happiness as well. And tell me a little bit about the book, because you have the book and I think it's going to be a huge success. Or not that I think, I believe it's going to be just by looking at the content of it. So share with us a little bit about the book so everyone can order it and get their hands on it.
Well, I really don't want anything to be behind a paywall. And I want this episode to be, if this is the only introduction you have to the work, that this is useful for you listening to it. The book talks about there's only 8 things that get in the way of our happiness. There are the 8 primary bad moods. And in the absence of these 8 bad moods, we are joyful. And it's really that simple, is that as a human beings, there are just 8 levels of negativity. They are shame, guilt, hopelessness, sadness, fear or anxiety, lust and pride, and anger. Those are the 8. And when like, of course, different things kind of like dovetail off of this. Hopelessness and depression are very similar. Hopelessness and overwhelm is kind of all hopelessness. So, and then you've got anger and annoyance and anger and frustration. It's all just anger. Right. So every single negative emotion you can name is just really bundled in these 8 different things. They're universal to humanity. That's what's wonderful. This morning, my wife comes to me in total overwhelm. She's just overwhelmed. And she's like, and I stop what I'm doing and I'm like, hey, it's totally fine. You're feeling overwhelmed right now. That's a subset of hopelessness. We all feel it. That emotion manifests the same way every single time in every single human. And that's what's wonderful, is that once we can recognize which one of the 8 moods we're in, we can then have compassion and grace for ourselves and say, okay, this is so predictable. I'm going to act exactly this way because this is overwhelm. When I get overwhelmed, I start to feel like life is losing its meaning. I don't have control. Everything's on my shoulders. I can't handle it all. And then I feel hopeless about it. Like it's never going to be bright out again. Like but that's just the normal way that we feel. And so I'm sitting there with her and now there's a way out of overwhelm. And the way out of overwhelm is that somebody helps you. That is the only way out. And in that moment, I'm like, this is my job. So I was going to do a workout this morning and I didn't. I sat with my wife, I'm like, just tell me everything. What's going on? And so she's telling me what she feels overwhelmed about. And I just sat with her. And of course, my energy in that moment was really high and positive. And that's what we really need when we're feeling hopeless or overwhelmed, is we need somebody's higher energy to vibrate with us. And that's really what pulls us out, is unconditional love for our condition, but then also solutions. And I'm like, okay, great. Let's just list out what's going on. And then I'm like, we're going to do this with this person. I'm going to have this person take over this. I'm going to take over this. And as soon as we started to just untie all these worries that she couldn't get to everything, within an hour, so much relief. And then now this afternoon, so much joy. So there's nothing wrong when we get into one of these 8 negative emotions. We're just totally normal. It's just how it is. Humans get overwhelmed sometimes, but we need to recognize it and not stay there for months and years, because if we could just get out of it within an hour, why not just be happy the rest of the day?
And I think you hit the nail on the head when you're like asking for help. I think of so many times, I was just having breakfast or coffee with someone this morning and they're like overwhelmed, and they weren't able to like book a trip, or they weren't able to do something. And I was like, ask for help. I don't want to ask for help. And I was like, but you have family. That's
actually the signature, Jenny, of overwhelm, is it not asking for help. You don't feel like asking for help. That's one of the signatures. Like you think of a type A personality, the person who has to control everything and do everything. That's actually someone that's kind of trapped in this emotion of overwhelm. that it's not actually a helpful thing. Like they think it is. And when I'm in that emotion, I think it is too. I'm like, it's all up to me. It's all on my shoulders. It's fine. I'll just do it. I'll just do all of it. You're not happy when you're thinking that way, ever. There's no happiness there. Joy comes from doing things with other people, right? Like that's joyful. When we band together as a team and everyone's got each other's back and we feel supported, that is so joyful. And actually that's reality. Okay. You're not doing everything in your music studios by yourself, right? You got all these people that are supporting you. Sure, you're the leader of it, but you couldn't do it without all of them.
Right. 100%. That's even just like where I'm thinking about like my studio manager, and I'm thinking about some of the team members, they're overwhelmed, but that's because they want to do everything. They want to check all those boxes. They want to have control instead of asking for help. So I want to encourage anyone that's out there feeling overwhelmed, please ask for help. There are people that want to serve you, that want to help you, that you can count on. And from your experience, Matt, what is the number one reason why people don't? Is it pride? Is it ego? Is it have to have control, or they don't know what they're going to do with the time if they allow other people?
No, it's just the emotion. So overwhelm is just one of the 8 emotions. And that emotion has a signature, signature energy and a signature way it plays out. And it plays out universally in all humans. And that signature is, it's all up to me and no one can help me with this. But what's great is once you recognize, oh, I'm just stuck in that emotion, there's nothing wrong. And I know anytime I get stuck in this emotion, I'm going to feel like no one can help me, or I can't count on anyone, or they can't do it as well as me. And you're like, but I also know that that's not the truth because I've read Good Mood Revolution. I know that that's just a feeling and it's not the truth. And that the way out of it is to actually ask for help. So in the book, in that chapter, I talk about building your team of your lifeboat team, because you need a lifeboat team, somebody that can come save you when you get stuck in this emotion. And I asked them to list 5 people that you know you could call and would be there for you. And maybe not show up at your doorstep because you might not need that, but at least be there for you like I was for my wife today, to just be that sounding board, to say, tell me how hard it is. I want to hear all of it. And no judgment whatsoever. You're just unconditional love. Of course you feel overwhelmed. Like, look at all the things you're juggling right now. We've got 4 kids. You're still working in this big job. And, and then you just went, some of it's joyful too. She just took my 6-year-old to see Meghan Trainor, and they sat front row, and Meghan Trainor, this was Monday, gets down in front of her and says, "You are the sweetest little thing," and points right at my daughter. And then she looks at my wife and says, "And your mama loves you so much." Like core positive emotion in both of their lives. But they were at a concert Monday, right? And then they had to travel back, and then that puts you behind at work. And so part of it is you're just tired, and even positive things can push us into a negative emotion. So it's kind of having grace for ourselves and then recognizing that we can get out. I want to just kind of go into each of the 8 negative emotions just quickly, because they all have a signature and they all have ways we can get out to get back to happiness. So the most destructive is shame. This is the feeling that I'm not enough. So many high achievers are driven by that single feeling. And in a way, we think it's positive. Even if it's subconscious, we think it's positive. That I'm not enough, I'm not doing enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable. So I'll prove I am lovable. This is how I built all that success, right? Was I had to prove to the world that I actually was enough, because my dad kept telling me I wasn't through his actions and his words when I was growing up. And I just wanted to prove that I was. The problem is fine to get all the external benefits of not thinking you're enough. But the problem is that when you become a billionaire and you're still not happy, right? When you achieve everything and then some, and then you still have this hole in your heart. Like, why am I not happy? Well, it's because all of our achievement has been built on the wrong foundation. It hasn't been built on just genuine inspiration and joy. It's been built on trying to prove something that we can't prove through achievement.
I was going to mention too, like when it comes to shame, like Brene Brown, I'm a huge fan of her, and like the power of vulnerability and shaming. And for years I was shaming people and I didn't realize I was really shaming them. And then I was like, oh my gosh, we cannot shame people. And even like with students, I mean, we're in a child-based business, so I see a lot of shame just with parents, with their kids. And it's like the constant judgment and the constant, like, is that good enough? Did you do this? And like all of that. And comparing them to other people as well. So anyways, I love what you're talking about, and I'm thinking about some of the people that work for me as well that struggle with this.
It's so interesting. I was shaming my daughter and I didn't recognize it. It took one of my coaches and friends, Matt Micheletti. I'm like, hey, my daughter is expressing some of the signatures of shame, and I'm like, this is so weird. I'm like, and he starts asking me questions. Are there any teachers that have been weird to her, or anybody that's talked down to her or like criticized her? And I'm like, no, we can't think of anybody. And he's like, and do you and Katie, do you guys like praise her when she does really well on tests? And we're like, yeah, we always do. We're always, he's like, and then when she does super well in athletics and things, you're like, I'm like, yeah, we took her out for ice cream the other day. She got all A's on her report card. He's like, yeah, you guys are shaming her. And I'm like, what? And he said, this is so weird, man. It's so trippy. But when you are praising positive outcomes, she feels like she's only lovable when she's achieving. And he's like, the subconscious context then is if she wasn't getting all A's on that report card, she would be less lovable. So she's creating now, and I'm only worthy if I achieve complex. And I was like, oh, dude, I totally have to undo this. And he said, yeah, you can totally undo this. It's no big deal. He said, all you have to do is just be real with her. So talk with her and say, hey, I was doing this. That's how I was raised, was when I achieved things that I got special treatment. I thought that was like a cool thing to do. It was actually not a cool thing to do. What I want to do is make sure you're unconditionally loved and accepted by me no matter how you perform. And so we started to just have that conversation. And then, she brings home the B, and she's like all bummed about it. And we're like, we love you so much. And look, obviously you did the very best you could. There's no other way you could have done. It's the best you possibly could have done. We're proud of your best. And we're here for you. If you want to study more, if you want to do whatever, like, we're here for you. If you don't, we're here for you. I just want her to be unconditionally loved and accepted.
Are you looking to enhance your relationship with yourself? If so, get the Stroke It Guide. My book is available on Amazon and on my website. Not only is my book going to help you with your personal journey with yourself, but it's also going to help you with the relationships of other stakeholders in your life. For instance, your spouse or partner, your employer, your employees, your friends, or your family members. And of course, because the title, there is a chapter for your pleasure, which is the last one, in the bedroom. The book offers lots of great tools and resources. There's a lot of great downloads, and it features many of my podcast guests, and they have thousands of downloads and resources that are worth a lot of money. So you're going to want to get my book today. You can buy that on Amazon or on my website, and you can change and take ownership of your life today with one simple click. 100%. That's amazing. I'm going to share that with some of my parents as well, and obviously I'm going to be sharing this with my team members. Okay, so let's get into the 7 other ones as well.
So the next is guilt or judgment. And this is the one where where we judge ourselves and we're super hard on ourselves. And we think that being hard on ourselves will make us great. We're like, oh, okay, no one's harder on me than me. That's actually, like, I used to say that. No one's harder on me than me. And I thought that was a good thing. It's not. Turns out that's not a good thing at all. And being hard on ourselves, we think, is pushing us to be better. We're like, oh, if we're not hard on ourselves, then we'll be lazy and we won't do anything. Not true. If you're a motivated person, you're a motivated person, whether you're hard on yourself or not. So then being hard on yourself when you're already a self-motivated person just makes you feel bad. And when you feel bad, you don't do your best work. Like, this in music, right? You make your most beautiful music when you feel so inspired and on fire. And when you feel on top of the world, that's when you're just playing completely free and in flow. Same with sports, same in business. So being hard on ourselves doesn't push us to greatness. It's actually a giant freaking weight. And if we could just cut the chain of it and be kind to ourselves, we run unencumbered and we perform so much better. So guilt doesn't help us at all.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of adults are struggling with this as well. Like, they have these expectations of themselves and they feel guilty, or they're like, I should be further. And I can align a couple people with this feeling right now, where I'm like, okay, I want to send them this podcast as well.
I'm one of them. I'm a recovering guiltaholic. It comes a lot with Western religion. right? And so there's a tremendous amount of guilt in Christianity, which I was raised in and love it. I'm a huge fan of Jesus. Jesus, one of my favorite people ever, maybe my favorite guy that's ever lived. And he didn't guilt us, right? So Jesus's whole thing is, I love you and you are loved. No matter what you've done, you're loved and accepted. That was Jesus's whole thing. But yet the church always made me feel guilty. And so that's one of the reasons guilt is so rampant in our society, is not actually from the words Jesus said, but from just like the way the message was interpreted. Like, if you don't do everything perfect, you're going to, burn forever. That's a pretty harsh message.
Yeah, like you're sinning, like everything you do is a sin.
Yeah, right. Everything is a sin. And so anyway, so that's how it gets implanted in us culturally. And we don't even recognize that we're super hard on ourselves because of the cultural influence. But what we want to do is just be super kind to ourselves. So the message there is always be thinking about all the things you do well. I have a friend who was actually, unfortunately, he was like suicidal. And the way he got out of it was he kept a little piece of paper in his wallet, and anytime he did something well, he wrote it down. And then each night he'd pull out the paper from his wallet and see all the things he did well that day, and his whole life changed. It's what I recommend. I recommend that I do this every morning. Every morning I sit down with my journal and I write down 3 things I did well yesterday. And then this starts to have me say, oh my gosh, I'm doing so much right, not so much wrong. And then everyone I see, I'm like, oh, you're doing that right. You're doing that right. You're doing that right. Because I'm counting things that everyone's doing right. And so that's the antidote to guilt.
I was going to piggyback that. I did an exercise with our team. We do a lot of personal development within our team meetings as well. And one way to build them up, to recognize all the things they do really well, to where they can lean into those and be happier, was I had them all write down like 5 things that they bring to the table. And I had some people that like wrote down 20 things. And then I had some people that couldn't even write down 1 thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, like there's no belief, or like, what is wrong with these people? And what I ended up having to do was all of our team members go around and say things they valued or they appreciated about that person, or that they do really, really well. And before you know it, those people had like 10 or 15 things on. And so now those are like hung up in offices or on their mirrors, as well, so they can lean into that and see their worth and their value and how they're contributing to not only to their own life, but to other people's lives as well, and that impact. And I found that to be super, super powerful too.
I just got chills. You are an amazing leader. Like, what a cool exercise.
Some days they will say that.
That is so freaking awesome. Yes, we need more of that. We need more of that with everybody, right? If we could just affirm what is right, but we only do to others what we do to ourselves, right? So when we're judging someone else, or if someone else judges you or puts you down, they're putting themselves down so much more, right? So when somebody insults us, we just need to have compassion for us, because it's like, if someone insults us, we don't need to get revenge. That's somebody that's already down and out. We don't need to kick them.
Right. Yeah. I personally did that exercise when I was feeling down and out and just feeling lost, and I was going through a lot of stuff emotionally, and I was lacking self-worth. And that's where I created this, like, what do I bring to the table, which I have right here. And I framed it because I was like, oh my God, this is so powerful. And it's something that I can reference. So it was like all the things that I brought to the table. And then I went a little bit deeper into it, and like how it impacts my life or how it impacts other people as well. And it's just a constant reminder. So I think that it's kind of just like what you do in the morning, but I don't do it every morning. I do it like quarterly or things like that. So thank you for sharing your story with us.
Perfect. In that it's so the 3 emotions that we've talked about, overwhelm and hopelessness, is just one, and this guilt and judgment is another, and that shame and rejection, those 3 are the 3 most destructive of the 8. If all we do today is just help people not harm themselves or others in those 3 emotions, this has been a super worthwhile episode. And I know you've got some other places you want to go. We've also got, the second half of the book, I go into 8 really positive emotions that we want to ascend to. And it's the 8 primary positive emotions. Eventually, we want to live a life of just pure joy and inspiration. Like, we want to live in so much love that every single person that we see out there we just have unconditional love for them. If we can just embody love, and I know this can sound woo-woo and hard to do. It's hard to do only when we're trapped in the 8 negative emotions. But once we get out of those, we start to see everybody is worthy of love. I had one of my friends had a sign over his desk and it said, "God doesn't make junk," and it had a picture of a little baby. And I'm like, how true, right? Every single person is deserving of love. Sure, they've made mistakes. I have too, but we're all deserving of love. If we can get to that emotion, life is so joyful. And that's at the top of the progression of moods. That's when we get to the height of happiness, is when we're truly just loving everybody. There's a lot of work to get there, but it's definitely worth it.
So are you finding with your work that people are needing to work through all those negative emotions to get to the second half of that philosophy where like they lean into all of the happiness, or can they just focus on the happiness stuff and not do the other work, or do they need to work through why they're unhappy instead of just like searching for just the happiness and like kind of overflowing that?
Both. Yeah, it's a great question. It's both. And so doing the practices in the second half of the book that are designed at like a gratitude practice, one of the 8 primary positive emotions is gratitude. Amazing, right? If we adopt a gratitude practice before we've dealt with the 8 negative emotions, great. We're going to feel better. So gratitude's never going to harm us. If we adopt more personal responsibility and less victimhood, responsibility is one of the 8 primary emotions, our life is going to improve. So doing both is going to work, but we can't actually though get to the highest levels of joy, peace, and love until we have dealt with and understand and accept the 8 negative emotions. So we can practice it. We can have periods where we feel peaceful. We can have times when we are joyful. We can have times when we feel loving, but we'll continue to get pulled back out of those beautiful states and into the negativity until we learn how to transcend it.
So I want to ask you this about denial, because I feel some people are in denial, or they don't want to acknowledge, or they don't want to admit that they're unhappy, and they don't want to necessarily do the work because they don't believe they're the problem or they're the reason they're unhappy. They want to like say, oh, it's all these other people and all those things. So how do we get people to acknowledge and take ownership of this unhappiness so that they can be fulfilled and they can have a life full of happiness?
That's the 8th negative emotion, and it's pride. So when we're really prideful, we already know everything. When we're really prideful, no one can teach us anything. We already know how to be happy. We already are happy. Can't you see? You're like, no, you're not. like I know what joy looks like. It's not that, right? The interesting thing about pride, the famous line of pride is pride comes before the fall, is that you continue to fall. You continue to fall on your face over and over and over again. And you just hope for that person that you love, that one time they fall, that they notice, I don't have to keep falling. One time they notice that I need to soften instead of harden. And the first positive mood is humility, because humility is the antidote to pride. We cannot actually be happy until we're humble. And we can't be happy until we finally admit we actually don't know it all. No matter how much we learn, we can never know it all. And it's all so much bigger and so much more complex and so much more like wild and magic and crazy and awe-inspiring. And that's actually what makes us happy, is like, how the heck are we even on a ball of dirt right now, flying through the middle of empty nowhere around a giant ball of fire? Like, how is this even happening? This is crazy that we get to be here right now and have this conversation across the United States. Like I get to meet you and how did we even get connected? This is so freaking awesome. It's all so magical and crazy, but it takes a level of humility to recognize how lucky we are that we even get to have a conversation with anyone.
Right. So if there are some people that are listening and they're letting their pride get in the way, and we want to encourage them to become more humble, do you have 1 or 2 tips that you can share with them today that they can lean into?
Yes, the number one tactic, the exercise is in my book, but you can get it for free. It's called The Work of Byron Katie. And you just Google The Work of Byron Katie, and it is a worksheet. What pride says is, I know the answer. I'm right. You're wrong. I know. what the work says is you actually know nothing. And it's so freaking cool when you go through it. You take any I know statement, and the work has you flip it around to the opposite and say, well, the opposite is also just as true as the statement that I just said, that I know. We really want to do this with emotionally charged statements like that person harmed me, or that person is an a-hole, right? Like they're a jerk. And I know they're a jerk because they did this, this, and this. Well, we flip it around and we say that person is actually really loving and kind. And that's just as true of a statement as the one I just said about them being an a-hole. Then you have to come up with 3 examples about why they're loving and kind. And you start to see your I know statements. If the opposite could be equally as true at the exact same moment, it takes the I know away and says, I actually know nothing. That there is no absolute truth. We can't actually say I know anything. And I know analytical minds can start to go crazy with this. Just do the work of Byron Katie as long as it takes until you recognize I can't know anything for certain because all the opposites are true. It's so fun for me to watch political season that we're in. And I know Republicans are right and I know Democrats are right, and both sides. How could this side be right and this side be right? It's because they're both right and they're both wrong. And like the holistic view is that it's like there is no absolute right way.
Right. I'm going to be sharing this with some other people. So earlier in the podcast, you had talked about happiness as a skill as well. And then you also indicated that being happy is a choice. Can you kind of explain a little bit what that means? People choosing to be happy or not?
Yes, we just don't know we're choosing it. So super, super fun thought experiment. Jenny, let's just think of what were some of the happiest days of your life? Like just think of 1 or 2 days where it's just like so joyful. What have you got?
Well, I'm going to say when I got married was a really great, happy day as well. And I would say the ribbon cutting of one of my locations was just seeing that all the hard work and all of the dedication come to fruition, and then surrounded by my friends and family and my biggest supporters.
So on the day of the ribbon cutting, and it's just this so happy day, right? Not everything was perfect that day, right? The day of the wedding, not everything was perfect that day, right? Some things went wrong. My wedding day is one of my favorite happy days too. A hurricane was freaking coming through Charleston, South Carolina, the day of the wedding. And on my wedding day, our flights got canceled and we didn't get any money for it. And it was like, we were strapped for cash, like trying to afford to go on a honeymoon anyway. And so like thousands of dollars of flights, and my wife is already stressed because this is a wedding day. And I'm just like, fine, put it on a credit card. We're going to Greece, baby. And so I buy new flights for like $6,000, right? We didn't have $6,000. So it didn't go perfect. And yet it's one of the happiest days of my life. And why though? It's because my expectations of reality that day were being exceeded. I was so in love with reality, even with the flights getting canceled, even with it having to spend money that we didn't have. Reality that day, I chose to say, this is wonderful. This reality, I love it. Well, when you are on your ribbon cutting day, you are saying, I am seeing how beautiful life is today. I am choosing to love this day. But the only person inside of you that's choosing to say that day is great is you. It wasn't the day. It wasn't the ribbon cutting. It wasn't all the work that you had done. Inside of you, you made a choice that I love today. We can do that every day. Like literally, we can choose to say every day is blowing my mind and like so much beyond my expectations of what today could be. Like I absolutely love today. Like I am so thrilled. Today's the best day of my life. We could literally make that decision every day. Now that seems kind of like, yeah, you say that, but could you? Yeah. Because you're the one making the choice. It's inside of us. The thing is, why we don't think this is possible is because we are being run by subconscious beliefs that make us think some days are not good. Some things that happen aren't good. We have other subconscious beliefs that say you can't possibly be thrilled every day. You can only be thrilled once every 15 days. Well, who set the bar to say I'm only allowed to be ecstatic once every 2 weeks or twice a month or once every 2 months, right? Who said that? I made that choice. Well, how do we make that choice? Usually when we're little, we look up at our parents and we see how often they allow themselves to be overly ecstatic. And then we model it and we say it's only appropriate to be overly ecstatic when you get a promotion. On that day, you can be ecstatic. On the other ones, no, not appropriate. So, anyway, we were the ones when we were kids that made that decision about what was appropriate to be ecstatic. Now that we're adults, we can totally reprogram all of those beliefs we originally programmed, and we can decide every single day is a day to be totally blissful about. This takes a lot of work. Remember in the beginning, I said you don't go to the gym once and then expect to be an Adonis. You go to the gym every single week, right? 5 times a week. If you want a great fitness routine, you got to work at it. If you want an incredibly happy life, like so blissed out all the time, like just so exuberantly joyful that people are like, your energy, I just want to be around you because you make me feel better, how much light you're exuding. If you want that, it takes a ton of work.
I was gonna say, it takes so much work, and some people don't realize the amount of work that it takes. And I remember having someone very close to me say, "You're just too happy all the time." And I was like, do you know how much work it took me to get here? Do you know how many heartache and the pain and the struggles and like the training that I had to go through to get here? And it was someone super, super close to me. I actually stopped talking to that person for about 6 to 7 months because I was just so heartbroken that was the response to me, because it takes so much work. And I want you to kind of lean into how much work that it takes, maybe encourage our listeners to take ownership and to do the work so that they can be here, because it seems like the outcome, why wouldn't you want to do the work as well? So encourage us to do the work.
Well, this is the reason that we should do it and why it's the most important work that we could possibly do. It's actually the only reason to do anything. Every single thing you're already doing, you're doing because you think it's going to make you happy at some point in time. Everything. We go to work because we think that the money that we're going to receive is going to make us happy one day. We have this relationship because we think that relationship is going to give us joy. We choose to have children because we think our children are going to give us joy. We choose to stay with and raise our children the way we think is right because we think that is going to bring us joy when they grow up the way that we think that we want them to grow up. Every single thing we do is to bring joy. Well, if everything we do is to bring joy and 80% of the world is not happy at this very moment, that's like a fact. 80% of the world is not in a happy state at this moment, then we're doing it all wrong. We're all working for it. We're going to work. We're working out. We're having our children. We're doing all these things we think are going to make us happy, and it's not working. So we're already working at it. Now, this is what I said when I had built all that stuff and I still was just super stressed out and not super happy. I just didn't know what to study. I was just studying the wrong thing. I thought that building success and building a family would give me happiness, and it didn't. So I said, okay, well, what will? Happiness routines and happiness practices will. What are, I'll just give you some simple ones. I already mentioned it, gratitude. Gratitude is the gateway to happiness. Like anytime, we can't be grateful and hateful at the same time. You can't be. You can't have a grateful heart and then also be all frustrated. It doesn't work. Those two things can't coexist. When you're fully embracing the emotion of gratitude, you have no choice but to start to smile and be joyful at how great life is. Sometimes, though, we can't just get to gratitude. Sometimes something is going on, then our subconscious belief is like arguing and resisting and saying, this shouldn't be happening. I was unhappy for a month in March. So in March, a giant lawsuit was filed against realtors. My companies are all in real estate. And I was resisting it. I'm like, this isn't fair. The government, lawyers, they're determining the fate of 100 people that work with me and determining my fate. This isn't fair. And I'm resisting reality. My resistance was creating my own suffering. But I had a belief system that said that governments and lawyers can't tear down something I spent 18 years building, and that's not fair. That was my belief system. Who created that belief system? I did. Who was choosing to hold on to it? I was. Who was choosing to suffer? I was. I couldn't control the outcome of governments and lawsuits. That wasn't within my control. I was fully in control of my belief system, though. And I was fully in control of the way I chose to respond to that situation. I just chose to wallow and feel like a victim for 30 days. And then when I had enough of that, I said, okay, I'm going to stop choosing this. And I started to choose different emotions. When we have something that happens that, truly is shaking us like that. Like for me, it's like, oh my gosh, we could lose hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. Like this could be really catastrophic for everybody that I love. You have to get to work, right? Like I had to get to work, and the resistance to it and the suffering was not helping me get to work. We're always doing it because we think it's going to help. Just that resistance and suffering doesn't help. So what do? The first step when we're resisting something is we say, okay, we have to recognize it. I'm resisting this. My resistance is suffering. Well, the opposite of resistance is one of the other 8 good moods, and it's acceptance. So I couldn't go from resistance, I don't want this and I hate it, to gratitude for it. You can't. There's a step in between that, and the step is I have to just accept reality. Have you heard of the book, The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer? He's got a wonderful story in his other book, The Surrender Experiment. Michael Singer built the company WebMD from his garage, and it was worth billions of dollars. And he built it on like one of the first computers ever. He was sued by one of his employees who was embezzling money from him and was fighting for his life in prison because that person framed him. And in their framing of him, the FBI came in, shut down WebMD and took him away in handcuffs. And then he spent 3 years fighting in courts for his life to prove that he was innocent and that it wasn't him that had embezzled the money. Totally unfair. Totally unfair. And Michael Singer is this spiritual giant, right? He wrote the book, The Untethered Soul, while he was fighting for his life. It's crazy, but he had to write this book about spiritual liberation because the pain of the reality of that moment was so big. He had to grow spiritually, right? To handle it. Well, his mantra during that time was, this is happening. What am I going to do about it? And that's the same thing I had to do with the real estate lawsuit. Finally, I just had to get to acceptance. This is happening. I can't change it. So what am I going to do about it? From acceptance, then you start to do something about it. Taking action leads to happiness. So I took a lot of action. It was great action, inspired action. From action, you then start to get to gratitude. And eventually, and that's what happens. Like we wouldn't have the Untethered Soul without the lawsuit against Michael Singer, right? I wouldn't have started a coaching program. I wouldn't have leaned into property management. I wouldn't have started to change lives in such a big way if it hadn't have been for the National Association of Realtors lawsuit. So the action I took ended up turning into, okay, this thing that looked like the worst thing actually turned out to be the best thing that happened this year. But while I was resisting it, it wasn't going to be that good.
Yeah. I want to lean into what you just said as well when you said acceptance and accepting it. It's kind of like with the story that inspired this whole entire project between my husband and I was accepting the facts, accepting the apology, and accepting that he was sorry and that we wanted to move forward. And that's what kind of spearheaded okay, taking action to rebuild our marriage, and then going into where we were grateful for the journey because we were reminded of what we had to lose, who we were, and then we were reminded that, hey, we should be really grateful. And we are so grateful for the journey because it brought us closer and we have a better marriage than we ever had before. So I love that you have brought into that acceptance as well. And I want to lean into 2 more things because we're going to have to wrap up very, very soon. I really want to have you quickly give us some inspiration or give us a little bit more information when it comes to the statement that it's not our job to make everyone else happy, and it's not their job to make us happy.
First, I just want to applaud you on the beautiful journey of your marriage. And it's so true. Your marriage is stronger than it ever would have been without the challenge. It's stronger now than if you hadn't had it. What's beautiful when we go through a challenge like that with somebody we love, and then we decide, I want you anyway, and they say, I want you as well, is that we now have so much strength and faith that we can weather a challenge in the future together. because we've been through one. So that first you went into acceptance, and then you went into gratitude, and then we move into love. And that's actually like the progression. It's always acceptance, gratitude, love, and then from love it gets to joy, and ultimately we get to peace. Each mood builds on top of the other.
Yeah, 100. And I would say like we're both at peace, like with everything that has happened, and like our goal now is to inspire other people and just to. I always talk about the gratitude, and I always talk about like turning the obstacles into opportunities. Like even just like with the obstacle of our marriage failing, it led me to journaling, it led me to writing a book, it led me to this podcast, it led me to having this amazing conversation with you, and it led us to being vulnerable and like creating a conversation where a lot of people are afraid to have it because of guilt, because of shame, and because of all the different skills that we had talked to, or feelings and emotions that we talked to at the very beginning of the podcast as well.
We wouldn't even have Stroke It if it hadn't have been for that. Man, I'm so glad you guys went through those troubles. I don't wish them for you to relive them, because you won't. But in the end, and this is what's so beautiful, is we start to realize every single experience is for us. All of them. They're all enriching us and helping us become our greatest expression of ourselves. Sometimes they're not comfortable. Like, hey, National Association of Realtors lawsuit was not comfortable. I had to let go of people that had been working with me for years. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't good for them. I mean, ultimately it was what was supposed to happen, but it wasn't fun, right? But it was necessary. And then we start to see there's gifts that come from it. Now I've totally lost track of what the question was.
So don't worry about it, because we're not going to be able to get to the question, but I do want to say, like, you had a statement and it was basically about not being our job, but I think your book is proof of taking ownership and making yourself happy first and foremost. And since we do have to wrap up, I really want you to tell everyone where they can get the book, how impactful this book is going to be. Matt has been working on this book for 5 years, and it's coming to life. It's coming to fruition. It's going to be available. And we want to encourage anyone and everyone listening to maybe even write your own book. You can impact so many lives and you can make a difference. And it is part of it. It was writing my book was a healing journey for me. I wasn't happy. I was struggling. I was dealing with shame. I was dealing with all these emotions that Matt talks about as well. And little did I know that I'd become an author. I was a C student, and I was able to see my way to CEO and author. And I want to encourage everyone to do that as well. And Matt, I definitely want you to share how people can connect with you. Send us to your website, send us to your social. You have been amazing. And I know I'm happy, and I'm sure all of our listeners are happy, but we really want to be even more happier. So tell us how to connect with you.
Yeah, the best way to plug in is actually through the Good Mood Revolution podcast. So I think continuing to listen to Jenny is what we all need to do. You are the truth. You're out here doing it. You're living it. You're not just speaking from theory. You're like speaking from lived experience, and that is the best. And then if you're looking for, she's putting out 1 episode a week. If you want a second happiness episode a week, come check out the Good Mood Revolution podcast, where every week we're talking about how to evolve ourselves emotionally. The book is on Amazon. It's also Good Mood Revolution. And those are the best 2 ways to get plugged in. And from there, we can see if conversations start to take place in other ways. But just so much appreciation for who you are, and so much appreciation. I see you. I know where your heart is, and it's beautiful.
Awesome. Well, I do appreciate it. If you could give all of our listeners one final takeaway, what would that be?
Love yourself. It's if we all just loved ourselves completely, the good and the bad, if we just fully accepted ourselves and loved ourselves, we wouldn't be hurting other people. It's our own self-hatred that we project then onto the world and other people that causes all the harm out there.
100%. Oh, Matt, you are amazing. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you to all the listeners. If you could think of five people in your contact list to send this podcast to, please send it to them. It's super powerful, impactful, and you never know what your friends or family members need to hear today. So I want to encourage you to send this podcast to 5 people. I want to encourage you to follow Matt, download his podcast as well. Consider giving us a review. And I just want to say thank you so much for tuning in today. Looking forward to having you on future podcasts. Matt, thank you again for being with me. I've really appreciated our conversation today. Thank you for tuning into the Stroke It podcast. I hope you were inspired. I hope you're willing and ready to take some action. I want to encourage you to consider 5 people that could benefit from today's podcast. Super simple to share this episode. You never know who could benefit from hearing this podcast and how you could inspire them to create the change in the life that they're wanting. Cheers, and thank you so much for tuning in. Also, consider giving a review.